So we're going to talk leg raises right quick, along with cable crunches and maybe physio ball crunches. This is going to be one of the exercises that you see commonly at every gym, everywhere. Most people are going to do it hanging from either a pull-up bar or in a squat rack, hanging from the overhead bar there. I prefer a dip bar version, and I'll explain why, but I also want to give you another tweak to enhance kind of the execution and the activation of the abs within the exercise itself. Full credit, though, should go to Ingrid Markham. She's the one who I originally got this cue from. She is a ex-Olympic bobsledder and skeleton team member, I believe, as well. She's a very accomplished gymnast and Olympic weightlifter, and she currently owns her own gym. So if you don't know who that is, look her up on Facebook, look her up on YouTube or Google her. She's an excellent coach to follow and somebody that you should be aware of. So full credit to her. Specifically with the leg raise, I like to set up in a set of dip bars. Specifically, when you take somebody overhead, you hang them from a pull-up bar, what can happen is that typically the person will overarch and overextend simply because they don't have the requisite core control to keep themselves in that position. And that's a whole other can of worms that we can discuss in terms of how you actually train the core. Rather than just going through flexion exercises, you also have to include anti-flexion, anti-extension, yada, 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 all the way down that rabbit hole. But when you put somebody on dip bars, what you're going to find is that you will actually teach them to cue the lats to push down into the bar. If somebody has lazy shoulders and they allow the traps to drift up, they will have to be cued to push down into the bar. So here what you're doing is you're getting co-contraction of the lats with the abdominals. So why does that even matter? Well, if you think about it, when you squat or when you deadlift, you're going to have co-contraction of those two muscle groups. With the squat, specifically when you're coming up, what happens when most people get to a sticking point? What are they told? Or what are they told throughout the entire exercise? To pull the bar down into their back like they're doing a lat pull down. The whole point of that is just simply to cue your lats, drive more of a thoracic extension moment to allow you to keep your chest up, but to cue the lats and stabilize the lumbar spine. Similarly, in a deadlift, we want to cue the lats to pull the bar in, because as soon as the bar starts to drift, you get more spinal shearing, and there's a better chance that you're not going to make the lift. So, put somebody on a dip bar, now you can teach them also to activate a lot more of the musculature, specifically the rotator cuff, around the shoulder blade, while getting a simultaneous co-contraction of the abs. To build off of that, if we're thinking along the gymnastics route, this is also going to be a progression into an L-sit. So if you're focused on building into that position, this can be a really good one on how to learn it. Initially with the bent knee version, and then going into the straight leg version. The second point is, when most people do leg raises, what do you see? For the most part, something like that, correct? Or you'll see a little bit more momentum, and you'll get people swinging. All right, so it's an okay leg raise. Or you may see, if someone's hanging overhead, they may do the bent knee version, right? So this specifically pertains to the straight leg version, but what Ingrid Markham was discussing at this conference that I went to, she mentioned that with a lot of her clients, especially those building into the L-sit position, thinking from a gymnastics perspective, for her, a lot of them actually were able to perform leg raises more effectively by keeping the knees slightly bent as they were going through their leg raises. And as you can tell, it's a little bit tougher. So let's think about what's happening here. What happens when we bend the knee? Well, rectus femoris crosses the knee, also crosses the hip. So as you're shortening at the hip, you're also, well, if you keep the leg straight, you're fully shortened at the knee. So now, what we've done is we're shortening at the hip, but we've slackened slightly at the knee. Tracking with me? Slackened as in lengthened a little bit. So, in this case, what you may find with a lot of people is that when they're doing leg raises, they tend to get cramps in their hip flexors, or they just feel their hip flexors working. So, if we can slacken rectus rectus femoris and not allow for a complete contraction at the top of the repetition by simply bending the knee slightly. Then as we come up, you're going to feel these a lot more in your lower abs. I did, at least. And so, little tweak, just keep the knees bent throughout the entire duration of the set, even as you come down into the bottom. Just keep a slight little knee bend and focus on moving entirely at the hip. So you want to think about from the knees, or just above the knees, kind of mid-thigh down. You want to think about that as relaxed. Don't worry about pointing your toes, don't worry about any of that. And this is strictly from a bodybuilding abdominal development perspective. If we're talking gymnastics, then yes, you will need to point your toes and focus on that aspect. But so keeping a slight bend in the knee is probably going to change that a little bit more. And the other thing that you can incorporate is if you have a foam roller. I have a shorter one around here, but just didn't think to grab it before now. So a foam roller, and you obviously want to use a short version, but you're going to put it in between your knees. And what this is going to do is it's going to help with activation of the abdominals and the adductors together. So a lot of times when people can't feel their abs, quote unquote, on an exercise, if you give them something to squeeze in between their knees, it doesn't even have to be a foam roller, it could be a yoga block or anything like that. That typically can make a fairly big difference in terms of where they feel the exercise. You can do this with chin-ups, add this in between the person's legs, and that's going to recruit the abs a lot more, and they're going to be fighting that anti-extension moment during the chin-up. So, combine everything, legs bent, set of dip bars, add something in between the knees. It's going to look stupid with a long foam roller. Think about this with a yoga block or a shorter foam roller. But, again, relax down here at my ankles. And I guarantee you, if you combine those two with a bent knee, squeezing something in between your knees, it's going to make a pretty big difference. So, give those three things a shot. Dip bars, bent knees, squeezing something in between your knees. It's going to transform your leg raises. So, test it out and let me know what you think.